Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to have the first panel today. And it's about scaling a real estate portfolio without losing track of a tenant needs. So scaling a real estate portfolio is very challenging. It should be done without losing a landlord's connection to the tenants. And we will discuss today what are the best ways for doing that. How can big companies stay in tune with the tenants' needs, and how large asset managers can improve the quality of the portfolio, increase the yield, and keep the tenants happy. So today with us, we have Giulio Limongelli. He's the COO of Dovevivo, one of the largest share living companies in Europe. And we have Sarah Quinn joining us, who is a serious real estate professional with over 20 years experience in the property industry. Her experience has covered the residential, student accommodation, and BTR sector. Please welcome Giulio.
Hey, Valentin. Hello, everyone.
Hey,
Thanks
very nice to have you here. And please welcome Sarah Quinn. Hi. Well, it's great to have you here. And maybe we start with a very light question in the beginning. Like how to drive tenant satisfaction. Maybe Giulio, you want to give it a go?
Yes, I think depending on how big your portfolio is, I think there are obviously two bases on the strategy to drive tenant satisfaction. One is service and technology, which is basically offering the best service, which sounds obvious, and we were discussing this before with you, Valentin, in the backstage, and it's not obvious, especially in these hard times. And technology, meaning that when you scale and you become big, becoming accessible in a different way, meaning can be a chatbot, can be a chat, can be different type of omni-channels, is obviously probably the main driver that you need to use to drive tenant satisfaction up. And at the same time, the third piece, sorry if I had one, is measure it. Because sometimes companies and large landlords and large portfolio owners or renters forget about managing and measuring what people are doing and if people are happy in their properties.
That makes absolute sense. So Sarah, like how would you measure tenant satisfaction?
Well, measuring satisfaction, I think, is sort of quite open-minded. But in terms of things like retention, I think this is pretty key to sort of looking at how successful operators are operating effectively. So retention cuts down on marketing costs, it cuts down on operational costs. So that's big wins for asset managers. But it shouldn't and couldn't be the only way that we measure success, because I think it's very important that this metric is sort of understood from each of the markets that operators operate within. So different cities could see a very transient demographic coming into their operational area. And so retention sometimes isn't necessarily a good way of actually measuring tenant satisfaction. I think COVID has also demonstrated this as well, on the back of the fact that a lot of people are moving into certain cities or moving out of certain cities because of the circumstances that they face. Retention at the moment isn't necessarily the best way to sort of look at this. But in terms of how to drive tenant satisfaction, and going back to sort of Giulio's point there, I think if you look at product, brand and service in combination, you actually get a really good sort of overview of what tenants are looking for from products. So the product being obviously the accommodation that people are sort of living in. Going back to the beginning, if you look at the construction process, quality product shouldn't be underestimated. And the quality of that product should be basically the portfolio asset for the customer. So the spec needs to be influenced by both the customer and the operational team at the same time. And I think this drives efficiencies, but it also drives reputation as well for each of the individual landlords. So I do think product is really important in this. Brand is hugely important. So people buy from brands and buy on reputation. So reputation, if you can't get your reputation right in the marketplace, you will see an impact on your customer take-up. So brand is hugely important, especially in the age that we live in at the moment.
No, that
And
makes sense.
Sorry, Valentin.
Yeah. Giulio, could you give us some insight on how you currently measure this for your company?
Yes. So we have two approaches at the moment. The one is what I mentioned to you is through technology, simple surveys, notification to know how people are, even SMS campaigns that are working pretty well on rating our services at every step when the tenants is coming in to when they leave. But at the same time, it's not only about technology. I think another piece that we should take into consideration, which is what we do, we constantly, every 3 months, 6 months, at least of some cluster or subcluster of our tenants, we simply have a tenant conversation. We call them or we visit them and asking how they are, what's going on, what we can improve. It's a constant interaction. And I have to say that, especially during COVID, this has become a really huge differentiation, I would say, goal. Otherwise, it's hard, especially during this hard time, to recover and to get at full capacity and full occupancy like the one that we were experiencing previously. We had a strong drop last year as everyone, and recovering has been a really tough path. And what you've seen so far is that the only way, apart from technology, is again calling and get in touch with people. People now want to feel some human touch. They want to know that people are taken care, especially when they complain about something. So now we are proactive and reactive. But if you complain, we call you immediately. We want to know what's going on, what we can do, and it's a constant improvement.
So, I mean, I'm coming from basically tech, And for us, it was always very important to have the 360 view of a customer, right? To understand, if they get stuck anywhere in the journey, if they're happy or unhappy with our service, and also what are their suggestions to improve our service. How do you keep all these various data points and various communication channels streamlined so that you have this view of a tenant?
So we have a CRM platform that is allowing us also to, through other providers like classical Zendesk, or we have basically a way real time to measure how people are doing. Obviously, you cannot do it with all the tenants that we have. We have more than 8,000 tenants across 3 countries, so it's not something that you can. Not everyone wants to give you feedback, but we have a repository where when someone is calling us, we basically know if they're happy or not, and this is helping us to again take measures whenever we need to take those measures. In this case, there's no spreadsheet that can work. You need to have a dedicated technology that is allowing you to follow the journey of the user and try to understand where they're happy, where they're not happy, and then have a global score about happiness of the tenants. It can be CSAT, can be NPS, but we basically have again our own property platform that is basically allowing us to cluster and to understand what the temperature is on the tenant side.
Sounds good. Sarah, do you agree with this? So basically have a CRM?
Yeah, I do agree with that, actually. I think having a property management system that is effectively engaged 24/7 with your residents is a primary objective for any operator. You want to be able to communicate at all times with your residents, and app technology means that you can do that. You can do that in many different ways: chatbots, apps. Having a customer experience that is fully engaged with your resident is fundamental, I think, in this operation. You can do the resident surveys as well, and resident surveys are quite powerful in terms of the data that they glean, but they can be subjective. So it's always sort of one of the clear points that when you do this, you can do this at a particular time of year, or you can do this as and when a tenant enters your building or when it exits your building. These will always be subjective, and it's always a good sense check for operators to sort of run the surveys at sort of fixed points with the residents. I think as well, from a home views perspective, this is a really good channel at the moment for sense checking, different operators and how well they're performing. So at the moment, we've not got a sort of a trip advisor as such for the real estate market, but HomeViews is pretty much very close to being that, I think. And it's good to sort of start to see performance now rated and seeing other operators rated against each other to some degree, but done by customers, not by sort of other operators. It's other customers rating their experience with that operator, which is great, and a good measure of how well each individual landlord is doing within that space.
No, I totally agree. I mean, transparency and visibility is always like one of the key drivers to a better service. Because if you don't know that there's an issue, it's very hard to fix the issue, right? And I think it's also it adds a lot of trust to potential tenants in the future to see, this is a company that really cares about my well-being and that really cares about my experience when I went with them. Something that probably is you had to deal with during your journey in that field is that when you have a very small portfolio, it's very easy to provide tenants with a great experience, right? Because you can champion everything yourself, you can be very responsive. But then, once your portfolio grows, and let's say from 10 to 100 to 1,000 or even 10,000 units, there will be stepping stones where it becomes exponentially more difficult because you basically have a bigger team you need to manage, you need to have more internal processes. So what do you see as the main challenge of scaling up a real estate portfolio while keeping tenants close to the business and their experience?
I'll share our experience, Valentin, because it's also different country to country and asset to asset. We have a really spread portfolio. We have apartments, we have co-living buildings, we have student houses. So obviously the approach had to be different based on the asset that we had. I would say, as you were mentioning, on the beginning it's pretty easy. You know everyone, you know all your tenants up to 100, 150. You still remember names of the people, especially when they are in a building. But then the real challenge becomes when you start transitioning from spreadsheet and human touch, is offering them the right solution to still feel that you are there. Meaning, going back to the technology discussion, it's finding the right way to personalize the technology experience. So chatbot is an option, but then you need someone human answering when the chatbot is not enough. Your app can be enough, but at some point someone needs to intervene. Is finding the right balance between putting a technology layer between you and the tenants, but intervene when it's needed, because otherwise the disconnection becomes huge. And in the end, to be honest, we are not Amazon. We are not selling goods on our website and we need to deliver. We are selling an experience, and people are choosing us in general as an industry because they want to stay there for at least a few months. It's their house, and they think and they need to get some attention on the human side. But technology, it's definitely the solution to scale, to control satisfaction, and to keep the satisfaction live.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what I can see is probably like at scale, you need to use various software providers and somehow, stitch them together. Like, how do you cope with that challenge? Do you, hire internal software engineers and product teams that, continuously improve your service? Or do you, for example, work with agencies that help you, connecting various layers?
We do both. We have an internal development team. We have now 20-something engineers, but we are using also external providers to support us, especially when it comes to integrations of various APIs. We have a proprietary platform. We have a layer with Dynamics, and then you need to go and look, for customer satisfaction, we use one tool. For another one, we use another tool. And we use external provider to help us. But the idea is the more we grow, the more our engineering base is going to be growing, because sometimes going outside is the fastest solution, but it's not the best solution. So the idea is to develop and keep developing a proprietary platform, and scale it from there.
That sounds great. Just so for the audience, effectively we have in about, I think 10, 15 minutes, questions from the audience. So if there's anything you would like to ask Giulio or Sarah, please post it in Slido, and we're gonna pick the top questions for them. Julia, like, do you agree with that sentiment that basically like we need a lot of software that tracks everything? There's some complexity in terms of, you know, creating processes and training people when you scale a portfolio very quickly?
It's to me, right?
Oh, sorry, Sarah. Sarah, do you agree with this, what Giulio mentioned? Or what is your own experience?
Yeah, I do agree. I think that going sort of right back, technology and people are the keys to the success of a sort of successful operation, full stop. And I think one of the biggest challenges for all operators and all asset managers is keeping a pace with what's going on within the technology industry at the moment. Proptech at the moment is phenomenal. There is pretty much, you know, a solution for every single sort of channel out there. And the challenge for many operators is keeping abreast of these new technologies that are coming out there, because there is, you know, very good solutions that are not widely known or circulated. And keeping up with that is almost a full-time job in itself. So I think that one of the biggest challenges is keeping a pace with what's going on in the tech industry so that operators can plug into those new challenges and changes for their own operation, and understanding of those and how they can benefit their customers. Because sometimes, you know, headline is that your tech platform can assist doing a certain you know, service, or can assist you in part of the customer journey, but you need to understand how and when is, you know, the right time to sort of plug that system in, and what that system can do not only for you but also for the customer as well. So I think keeping abreast of what's going on within the technology industry is huge. I think using the technology not only for customer but also for team and people is very important. So training of individuals and getting them sort of up to speed with the latest you know, legal requirements in certain sort of respects. And also from the point of view that you've got a CRM system that can also interact with your customer at the very beginning and also during the pace of that journey as well. So I think the technology side of things is really hugely important and can't be underestimated, certainly from a growth and a scale perspective.
Yeah, just to dig a bit deeper there. So, I mean, Giulio mentioned they have an in-house team, and I assume most bigger operators will have some engineering product teams in-house, just basically like communicate with stakeholders.
My experience hasn't been an in-house operation of working. It's been a case of working with an outside software company and bespoking something that worked for us and our teams. And I think that if you develop a relationship with a software provider that will grow with your business, I think that's a very sort of cost-effective way of doing a growth scenario, from starting from one asset to many assets. There are sort of you know, risks, I guess, associated with that. You know, the fact that you could be working with an organization that isn't sort of, you know, founded on good foundations, or may not sort of go the distance, as it were. But I think sometimes if you weigh up those risks, you actually can see a much better sort of return on investment if you're sort of putting, you know, a lot of faith and a lot of trust and a lot of business into, you know, these startup software companies. My experience has been that, you know, working with software companies, that they want to grow with you and they want to learn from you and they want to sort of bring their product to the wider market. So it's in their vested interest to work with you in a really sort of partnership way.
That makes sense. And you know, one thing that I heard from both of you is that basically there's different tenant demographics. So you have maybe, you know, like young students that need to stay for like a couple of months. You have, you know, young professionals that just relocated to a new place or renting their first home after university. And you have, families that have, again, other requirements to a home. How do you, if you have a big portfolio of unit, how do you keep all tenant interests at the best heart? And how do you make sure that everybody has, a very high experience renting with you?
I think going back to my initial point in terms of the product and what that product looks like is fundamental, really. In terms of kind of what we're seeing in build to rent, we're seeing a lot of towers coming out of the ground in many of our regional cities and in London as well. Some of these towers may not necessarily fit a certain customer demographic. But we're also now starting to see the existence of a more multi-family style approach, as in the US, where we're starting to see sort of housing estates being part of the build to rent family now. And I think that that's really important because, build to rent as a sort of marketplace has sort of significantly focused on the millennial sort of groups. And I think that we need to sort of start to look at the product and how it fits different demographics across the board. And I think the right way that we're seeing that now is these different styles of product designed for, customer base, and also, the demands of what people are looking for from a rental perspective. And the way that they are managed is going to be different. Going back to the technology side of things, if you've got a housing estate in, on the outskirts of Oxford, are you going to have somebody on site all the time? No, you're not. You're going to need to use technology in a much more dynamic way to manage the residents and to manage the tenants, because they are not going to have an on-site office or an on-site team to sort of utilize. So I think that the way technology is used in the different styles of customer and the different styles of operation is something that we need to be mindful of when we're scaling up our portfolios.
Sounds good. Just to be mindful about time, we have a couple of questions for the audience. Maybe we start with one towards Giulio. So we have a person asking, is it a problem for companies like Dovevivo to work with many Proptech vendors because these typically have a national focus and Dovevivo covers Europe?
It's definitely a problem, and that's where we use external software provider to us with integrations, working in multiple countries, or having an international, scope and geographical presence. But it's definitely a problem. The only way, in this case, it's not something that you can solve with internal engineers. You need to have someone outside, like a system integrator or similar. Doesn't need to be a class, doesn't need to be Accenture, doesn't need to be Salesforce directly. You can have these mid-market companies that can help you to integrate various platforms and various softwares.
That's cool. And another question that got some upwards. We've talked a lot about tracking tenant needs once they are residents. But what about potential tenants? How best to monitor service, brand, and product for them?
To me or Sarah? Just for me.
Whoever wants to pick it.
Sarah, I think you go if you want.
So new residents, I think this is going back to, I think, sort of understanding the marketplace really, and understanding sort of what goes on in your localized area, because where operators do tend to sort of fall foul is that we make a broad brush approach to sort of maybe a national sort of situation, and it's not necessarily the same in each local market. We could have, for example, a lot of creatives looking for co-living in London, for example. We could have a lot of sort of, floating workers moving into Manchester. These are the different types of demographic that shape not only the resident experience, but also it will shape the marketing, it will shape the product, and it will shape the way that we sort of service these customers. So I think that understanding where you're going to be opening and operating your assets and understanding your marketplace, first and foremost, is key to all of this. And then understanding what type of technology you need to apply, certainly in those circumstances. If you've got the technology that is open and it has the API capability to sort of plug in and plug out, that means that you can sort of be as dynamic as you possibly can within those localized marketplaces.
That makes sense. We've talked a lot about technology and how technology can help, to scale up a portfolio, but also keep tenants happy. What I'm wondering is, so if I look at real estate, it has a very unique challenge, which is that I need to buy or lease a property in a certain location. And it's not that easy to physically change the appearance of the property as well as like change the location, right? So how do you, since, tenant needs are, changing much more quickly than, let's say 20, 30 years ago. And for example, a situation like COVID can, flip your whole business model overnight. How do you keep your portfolio quite flexible so that you can be agile and change it based on tenant needs? Maybe Giulio, you want to?
Yeah. So I think so. Our approach, obviously, it's a really tough question because it's not easy when you have something physical to change it overnight. Like I'm coming like you, Valentin, from tech and software. So I was used to run a website. I need to do a change. I do it tomorrow, and on Friday is live, right? Here is not the same thing. So our approach to construction has been over the years to standardize as much as possible and any modules that we can change or move here and there. And that's one answer. The second one is obviously it's having a kind of a, I don't want to say yearly or I would say yearly review of how the assets are working and looking based on what the demand is becoming, and then adapting ourselves to what the demand is becoming. The third piece, we are testing here and there simple sensors, meaning in the houses, in the buildings, to see how people are using the space and how this is gonna change during the years and during the months, and maybe build the new units in a different way. That's the way we do it. But it's honestly, it's not easy. COVID has changed dramatically a lot of assumptions that we were making in the past, like common areas. We were building, especially when we were targeting students housing, we were building massive common areas. And today, the majority of them are closed because we are not allowed to open them to the public. It is an underutilized space. At the same time, building large common areas, you build smaller rooms. And at the same time, people are trapped and stuck in a smaller room. It's not an easy moment, but for now, our approach has been helping us on optimizing the experience and the construction costs at the same time. But I think with the sensor and what we're testing now, probably we're going to get a better way to tackle this. It's never going to be like software. We cannot change a bathroom or a wall or repainting everything within 24 hours. But maybe we're going to find a way to get there and have a less complex cycle of rebuilding and readapting our properties to what the tenants are asking us.
That makes sense. And maybe Sarah, how would you improve operational efficiency without impacting customer satisfaction? Do you believe it should be a very slow, gradual move out, or what's your experience on this?
I think slow and steady for sure, because I think if you try and change too much in your operational flow, having introduced a certain way of working, it can have a number of sort of ramifications. I think if you sort of, keep your tenants in the loop, number one, and keep them sort of abreast of any sort of new sort of structures that you're sort of going to roll out, but do it step by step and not all in one go. I think that's very, very important. You want to take your customer on a journey. Let's not forget, they are your customer. You don't want to sort of, blind them with, corporate changes. You just want to hold their hand and take them through that process. I think that is super important when you're doing sort of operational sort of management and operational change. I think going back to the previous question though, in terms of, you know, the sort of the resilience of your building and of your team, I think one of the things that, you know, to make buildings future-proof and resilient in many respects is the infrastructure supporting Wi-Fi, because I think as we've all seen, we've spoken about technology so much, and going back to that product and that construction, even if you do one thing when you're doing your construction, you need to sort of have the infrastructure there that will support future-proofing from a Wi-Fi perspective, because Wi-Fi is not going to go anywhere. It's only going to get a stronger sort of requirement. In fact, I think Wi-Fi is probably the most demanded item over all utilities in this day and age. So if you can get your Wi-Fi infrastructure to where it needs to be right at the day one, you can then, even in a retrofit scenario, sort of go back and do smart technology in your building. You can do smart home technology in your apartment. So these are sort of easy wins further down the line if you've got that Wi-Fi infrastructure right at the very beginning. And that will help with an operational sort of manifestation. It will also help your customers going forward as well.
That makes sense. One question is about the rise of machine learning and wellness agenda. How big of a role do you see applications or, you know, amenities play in the future of renting versus, for example, actual data on occupants and environmental quality?
I'm gonna briefly answer. I think everything related to machine learning is going to play a big role in the future, on not only on the satisfaction side, but on the construction side, on the pricing side, and on the environmental, obviously, side. But I think personally think we are still far from where it needs to be. Also because it's still a heavily costing technology. It's going down on a unit level. It's going to take, I think, a few years to be affordable for everyone, but it's definitely going to play a key role on everything across the construction piece and the maintenance piece related to environment.
No, I agree. And so, I mean, this is actually a good transition to the last question. Which areas of Proptech do you think is currently underdeveloped or underserved? Where do you see the biggest opportunities for technology to help with property management and operations?
My feeling on this one is that for Proptech developers to really sort of knuckle down on maintenance, having a singular sort of customer journey that doesn't differentiate and doesn't sort of zoom in, zoom out from different applications at the moment is quite a challenge. So my sort of viewpoint is Proptech developers out there, maintenance is the one area that I would say focus energy on.
I couldn't agree more, to be honest. Maintenance and cleaning also.
That's good. Awesome. Well, it was super nice to have you here. Super interesting panel and get your insights. We'll continue in about 5 minutes with our next panel about property viewings, the past, present, and future. Thanks, Giulio and Sarah, for joining us here today. It was super insightful. For the people that watched, we're going to send you a recording of this so you can rewatch it and you know, get the most out of it.
Thanks, Valentin, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye-bye. Bye, Giulio. Bye, Valentin.